Good morning, sir. Good morning, classmates. Our report for today is biological molecules from Group 5. Meron tayong apat na major classes ng biological molecule. Ito ang mga carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Ano nga ba ang biological molecule? A biomolecule or biological molecule is a molecules present in organisms that are essential to one or more typically biological processes, such as cell division, morphogenesis, or development. Biomolecule, or also known as biological molecule, any of numerous substances that are produced by cells and living organisms. Biomolecules have a wide range of sizes and structures and perform a vast array of functions. The four major types of biomolecules are carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. Biomolecule, ito ay ang mga chemical compound na maaari natin makita sa mga living organisms like animals, human, sa living organisms. Tapos yung chemical na ito ay composed ng carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. But ang pinakamahalaga dito is yung carbon. May tatlo tayong molecules. Ito ang mga macromolecules, polymers, at monomers. Unahin kong i-discuss dito ang macromolecules. Ano nga ba ang macromolecules? Ito ay a large carbohydrates, protein, and nucleic acids are chain-like molecules called polymers. Ang example ng macromolecules ay ang carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Sunod dito ang polymers. Ang polymers is a long molecule consisting of many similar or identical building blocks linked by covalent bonds. Ang polymers daw, dito galing yung mga macromolecules. Like sa proteins, meron tayong amino acids. Sa carbon naman, carbohydrates, meron tayong sugars. Sa lipids, meron tayong lipid monomers. And sa nucleic acids, meron tayong nucleotides. Ang huli, ang monomers. Our smaller molecules serves as building blocks of polymers. In short, para mabuo ang polymers, nanggaling muna siya sa monomers. Like sa carbohydrates, meron tayong monosaccharides. Sa lipids, meron tayong glycerol and fatty acids. Sa nucleic acids, meron tayong nucleotides. And sa proteins, meron tayong amino acids. Una, sa biological molecules, ang carbohydrates. I-discuss ko siya ngayon. Carbohydrates. Alam naman natin na ang carbohydrates, ito yung magbibigay sa atin ng energy sa araw-araw. Carbohydrates ay makita natin sa rice, breads, at iba pa. It says that carbohydrates serve as fuel and building material. Carbohydrates are composed of molecules which is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Carbohydrates are the main source of energy for cell metabolism. It composed of simple repeating units called sugars of monosaccharides. Carbohydrates are also goods sources of raw materials for other organic molecules and energy. So, pupunta tayo sa classification ng carbohydrates. Una na dito ang monosaccharide. Monosaccharide, one sugar unit, the simplest carbohydrate with basic formula CH2O. Monosaccharide is the major cellular nutrient, and monosaccharides often incorporated into more complex carbohydrates. The example of monosaccharides are ribose, glucose, and fructose. Most monosaccharides, or simple sugars, are found in grapes, other fruits, and honey, although they can contain from 3 to 9 carbon atoms. The most common representative consists of 5 or 6 joined together to form a chain-like molecule. Three of the most important simple sugars, glucose, also known as dextrose, grape sugar, and corn sugar. Next, fructose, fruit sugar. Sunod, ang disaccharide. Disaccharides have two sugar units connected via glycoside linkage. Disaccharide is the energy source and also the sweetener and dietary component. The example of disaccharide are sucrose as table sugar, lactose or sugar in milk, maltose or malt sugar. Two molecules of a simple sugar that are linked to each other form a disaccharide or double sugar. The disaccharide sucrose or table sugar consists of one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. The most familiar sources of sucrose are sugar beets and cane sugar. Milk sugar or lactose and maltose are also disaccharides. Next is polysaccharides. Polysaccharides have many sugar units linked by glycosidic bonds, storage material for important monosaccharides, and also structural material for the cell or the entire organisms. The example of polysaccharides are starch, cellulose, chitin, peptidoglycan, and glycogen. Polysaccharides, the term means many sugar, represents most of the structural and energy reserve carbohydrates found in nature. Cellulose, the principal structural component of plants, is a complex polysaccharides comprising many glucose units linked together. It is the most common polysaccharide. The starch found in plants and the glycogen found in animals also are complex glucose polysaccharides. Starch, from the Old English word stercan meaning to stiffen, is found mostly in seeds, roots, and stems. It is stored as an available energy source of plants. Plant starch may be processed into foods such as bread, or it may be consumed directly, as in potatoes, for instance. Glycogen, which consists of branching chains of glucose molecules, is formed in the liver and muscles of higher animals and stored as energy source. The next type of biological molecules are the lipids.
Lipids are a diverse group of hydrophobic molecules. Lipids are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but contains very little oxygen compared to carbon and hydrogen. Hydrophobic, insoluble, or barely soluble in water. Lipids is esters of alcohol and fatty acids, a class of large biomolecules that are not formed through polymerization. The monomers of lipids are glycerol and fatty acids. Classification of lipids. First is fats. Fats is used to store energy composed of glycerol and three fatty acids. Example of fats: saturated fat, unsaturated fat, neutral fat, or triglyceride. The second one is phospholipids. Phospholipids are main component of all cell membranes in all organisms. Phospholipids are composed of glycerol, two fatty acids, and a phosphate residue. Example: phospholipids self-assemble into bilayers when surrounded by matter and form the characteristic structure of plasma membranes. Third is steroids. Steroids regulate fluidity of cell membranes. It is the base of sex hormones and have a common four-ring structure. Example: cholesterol found in cell membranes regulates the rigidity of the cell membrane and are the base material for the production of sex hormones like estradiol and progesterone. Another type of biological molecules is proteins. Proteins include a diversity of structures resulting in a wide range of function. Proteins is the most diverse biomolecule in terms of structure and in terms of function. It is composed of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Structured as chains of amino acids linked by peptide bonds folded into unique 3D shapes and held many different molecular forces. The monomer of protein is amino acid. from enzymatic proteins, which is the selective acceleration of chemical reactions, to hormonal proteins, which is the coordination of organisms' activities, to contractilia and motor proteins, which is the movement, to defensive proteins, which is the protection against disease. They also storage proteins by storage of amino acids, to structural proteins, which is to support, to receptor proteins, who responds of cell to chemical stimuli. They also transport proteins by transporting substances.
Another type of biological molecule is the nucleic acid. Nucleic acids store, transmits, and help express hereditary informations. Yung nucleic acid daw yung nagsistore, nagtatransmit, at tumutulong ma-express yung hereditary informations. It carry and interpret genetic information, composed of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Yung nucleic acid daw is nagka-carry siya tsaka ini-interpret niya yung genetic informations. Tapos, composed naman siya ng carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, tsaka phosphorus. The amino acid sequence of polypeptide is programmed by a discrete unit of inheritance known as gene. Genes, yun yung nagko-consist ng DNA, kung saan kabilang naman siya sa class of compounds na tinatawag nating nucleic acid. Sa nucleic acid, meron tayong tinatawag na deoxyribonucleic acid or DNA. DNA, siya yung nagsistore ng hereditary informations. Yung genetic materials ng mga organisms, naka-form sila ng pa-double helix. Tapos yung information sa DNA, naka-store siya bilang code. Meron tayong tinatawag na 4 chemical bases. Yun yung adenine, guanine, cytosine, tsaka thymine. Tapos meron ding sugar na attached sa DNA. Yun naman yung tinatawag nating deoxyribose. Pagkatapos ng DNA, meron naman tayong tinatawag na RNA, which is yung ribonucleic acid. Yung function ng RNA is sa protein synthesis. Tsaka yung genetic material of retroviruses. RNA is yun yung single-stranded helix with 4 kind of bases. Yun yung mga tinatawag natin na adenine, cytosine, uracil, tsaka guanine. Tapos yung sugar natin sa RNA, tinatawag siya na ribose. The 3 most well-known and most commonly studied types of RNA are ribosomal RNA, messenger RNA, and transfer RNA, which are present in all organisms. Yung ribosomal RNA, siya yung main translator ng protein synthesis. Tapos, yung messenger RNA naman, yun yung nafo-fold into subunits ng ribosomes. Transfer RNA or tRNA, ito yung nagtatransmit ng genetic message from DNA papunta sa ribosomes. Yung transfer RNA din, yung adaptor molecule composed of RNA. Kadalasang 76 to 90 nucleotides yung haba niya. Bali, yung tRNA, siya yung nagsiserve bilang physical link between mRNA tsaka amino acid sequence of proteins. Lastly, tRNA carries a sequence of bases on one end and corresponding eukaryotes.